Welcome to the upstreamlife.com. I'm your founder and editor, Vishal Krishna. I love talking technology, and technology is changing everybody's life. But what about a fund that's changing the lives of startups in Deeptech? I've got the partner from Seafund with me, Narendra Bhandari, who I've known for a while now. And coincidentally, we do a podcast many years later. Thanks, Narendra, for being here.
Pleasure.
What is Seafund? I thought it's about aquamarine stuff and marine technology, but it's a lot more.
Well, it's technology. So we love to invest in deep tech startups. This is our second fund. Fund 1, we did about 13 investments. Fund 2, we made 5 deals so far. We're looking at companies who build really cool deep technology, which solves, problems, and, are looking at making more investments over the next sort of year plus.
You will understand what he means by deep tech if you watch this podcast. Believe me, all you chip guys out there would be really interested in listening to this. He comes from a chip ecosystem, of course. Enjoy the podcast. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Narendra, thank you for being on the Upstream Life. It's a pleasure to have you because we've known each other for such a long time. We met when you were in a CVC arm of a large company, Intel, of course.
Intel, yeah.
And then obviously you've moved on and you've come back into the startup world. How's the transformation been for you from being a CVC, fund manager to a manager of a proper fund now?
See, I started my career as an engineer, thousands and thousands in India do. And this was a journey. I was doing electronic design tools at Intel, helping build chips, EDA tools as the industry calls them. We met around the time when I moved to India. So there was this itch. My wife keeps saying, I don't know why, but you always wanted to move India. And then, so finally she agreed to move to India with me. And we came here and I started doing sales, frankly, helping salespeople, tech sales and stuff, because India didn't have that many tech roles in 98.
Yes. I mean, we're talking just 2 decades ago, there was nothing, right? Yeah.
Intel was about 20 odd people in Duke in Bangalore. So I had a chance to meet a lot of customers and try to convince them about technology. We used to run campaigns to convince banks and many large institutions to use email to improve productivity. Right? And that was the era where we started introducing technology into governments. And I remember spending tens and tens of visits to Delhi, talking to people about how technology can improve productivity, can improve transparency, and not necessarily result in job loss, right? Which was not an easy argument. Nobody believed you at that time.
At the time, I remember covering some insurance companies, and they would say that technology. I mean, especially the PSU, LIC, they would say that technology would wipe out jobs.
There were hoardings and stuff around town.
Absolutely.
So, but we would go and tell them how growth will happen and stuff. But back to your question. So while this journey was going on within Intel, corporate Intel had started doing some investments, venture investments. And it wasn't even called Intel Capital. It was called business development something. So Shiva, my boss, and I was like a trained software engineer, right? I was not a silicon engineer, I was a trained software engineer. India was a software country. So a couple of times, the corporate team would say, hey, can you go do diligence on some company? X, Y, Z. I said, sure. Being a software.
So tech diligence, of course.
Tech diligence. And being a bit of a Marwadi blood, I would end up asking some financial questions to understand. And that's how that investing journey started. I still had a day job, literally, right? Like running tech pre-sales or sales or developer marketing and those kinds of things. But slowly, the investment portion in India also grew. Shiva kept pushing more and more. And I kind of got involved with almost 8 or 9 investments in reasonable detail, right? Of course, supported by some very strong treasury folks and stuff. And if I look back now, almost 5 of them went IPO, right? Which includes Saskar and IIT. And in that journey, met some fantastic founders. Most prolific right now being Anand Deshpande, Persistent, who also sort of, got there.
And you convinced Intel to actually put in money in many of these companies, and through deals also, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this is a typical corporate process. We would write up, build decks around why this is important, why. At that time, our story was India, India, India. right? That was the story, right? You have to be in India. This is a land which is growing, developers, consumers, tech. So you have to ride that wave. Infosys was, of course, the poster child across the globe. So our story was, only India, right? And of course, all the other. And then the larger corporate arm of Intel said, "Yep, we should do more." And then
and then it took off. And then obviously you were well known in the startup world. And then you went into another large company, Microsoft, to build their startup network. But when you came back into a fund, what was when you came to seafund, what was the hypothesis for you?
I think the difference in when we were doing investments from Intel was that the investment ecosystem was pretty small in India. There were a few real VCs. There was very small angel network, very, very small. And as you realize, for an ecosystem of startups to thrive, you need angels, you need mid-stage VCs, you need large VCs, you need all stages. India didn't have a very healthy dose of those early investors, risk takers, right? And at some point, even while I was doing that, I'm like, well, this is not for me. I'm a techie at heart, so went back to doing tech, sales, stuff. Then, like we talked about, the journey from Intel to Microsoft was more of a pull than me running. But anyway, it happened. I'm glad I had a chance to work with some very, very great minds, including Satya. It was fantastic to see how tech startups were taking to the cloud and taking to a cloud which was not popular, which was Azure in those days. So my relationship with developers, which through Intel also I was doing, and the understanding of the whole developer ecosystem helped me at Microsoft quite a bit.
Okay, and then you came to seafund with this hypothesis that, look, let's look at deep tech, because software is also deep tech.
Yeah, so that became very clear. The whole cloud SaaS business model workings became very clear as I worked through that journey. So when we were, getting into the seafund 2 journey, fund 1 was getting close, and I was talking to the, founding partners, it became very clear that there is deep tech SaaS. You just have to understand the color of money, as we talked about, and we'll talk in more detail. You have to understand how is it that they are SaaS, and what is tech in that SaaS.
Do you want to explain that? Why is software deep tech is a technical question. Then the color of money in software, how do you understand it?
Sure. See, traditionally, Indian industry, the $200 billion out of software industry now reaching or crossing 300, I think now, has been, we export a set of services, right? Or the Indian companies do something for a customer, whether in India or globally, mostly globally. Typically, in our terms, we would call that as a services revenue. Now, there is software as a service and services as a component. Now, these are different revenues, right? That revenue is for a purpose, for a project. You finish the project, you get the money, and then you move on to the next project. SaaS changed that a little bit and said, well, it's not a service, it's not a product, but it's software as a service, or like a product as a service. Now, besides the English, the math behind this is you're getting paid on a regular occasion for using a product. So it could be something as simple as you use Microsoft Office for a couple of dollars a month instead of paying a few $100s upfront.
Got it.
And it kind of went up. Now that industry started, that business model
started
picking up. Subscription, right?
Yes.
So that business model started picking up. And in that, to your question about tech now, right? Initially, many of the companies were implementing logic, right? They take a business flow, implement it, and you could start doing accounting on the cloud. You could start doing some logistics. But it got deeper now, right? The tech part, the deep tech part, was building logic of the consumer or of the customer or the enterprise customer or the enterprise customer's customer, right? So if you are building a SaaS product for a bank or for an insurance company, the deep tech is in analyzing the bank's customer, right? Should I be lending money to them? What is their credit rating? Should I be reinvesting on the premium which they are either able to pay or unable to pay? Should I be giving them a credit score? All this requires much more than just implementing logic, right? Finsol is one example in our portfolio. They help you figure out whether you should be going and doing this or not, at what extent. So to your point, there is a lot of deep tech in SaaS in software also. More recently, I mean, unless you've been hiding in some place, AI is everywhere.
Yeah, everyone's talking about
Everyone's talking about it. It is real, right? It is real. It is going to have an impact on all of us. All of us. Regardless of your economic spectrum, regardless of the function you do, you could be an artist, you could be a writer, right? You could be telling stories.
Yes.
It's going to have an impact on everybody. Or you could be sitting at home and doing a home-based businesses. Now, here in India, what we've seen so far is a lot of companies using deep tech to solve problems. The difference where I think we're catching up, and hopefully we catch up faster, is creating deep tech. Right? Building those hardcore LLMs or SLMs or whatever we might end up coming up with, or new form of LMs to solve brand new problems. Right? That's an area. Now, me using a ChatGPT-4 to solve a problem and making it really easy for somebody is me using deep tech to solve a problem. Versus me coming up with a brand new language model under ChatGPT or something else is creating deep tech. So you see a probably 80-90% mix of companies using deep tech.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's more of the latter, right? More of the former, pardon me.
Correct.
Most of them are still using a certain form of AI, but they haven't built the underlying layer on their own yet.
Correct.
Will that happen?
They're probably doing some customizations, which you need to do. To your question, I think it will happen. There are some constraints right now, data sets, availability of hardware, availability of, large scale training infrastructure, which, many of the global companies have had, a head start. I think once those things ease, this will make it easy for the Indian companies also to invent new, and India has been known to leapfrog.
Yeah, and we leapfrog quickly. Right.
So I'm hoping that we leapfrog this AI wave also and get into a future much faster, but we'll see.
And why do you say we'll see? Is it because the talent one is it's not you, but the world of news is contradictory. On one level, they say AI will be built by humans, but now you're right. A lot of the jobs are dependent on AI so much that you could create interviews. It may be just you and maybe something else, which is an image of me maybe or something else, and just interviewing you the way I do. See, that's happening.
You have to fundamentally believe that technology creates more value.
Yes.
Right?
I do believe it too.
So when you have that fundamental belief, we go back to the example of banking and computing. Right? People felt once computers come in, you don't need a teller. Once ATM machines come in, banks will get wiped out. Once the automated phone exchanges came in, the phone industry will be dead. Right? Today, the phone industry has sparked off probably several $100 billion worth of innovation, right? Whether it's cameras and pictures and hailing cabs and ordering food and stuff like that. So you have to go back to the core belief that tech will create more value.
I think so too.
Right?
It's
when you see more value coming in, you'll see more jobs. So when there is this argument of will AI replace jobs,
it's going to enhance jobs, according to me.
It's going to enhance, and my belief is that it will create more value. Now, some jobs which were being done by humans probably will not need those humans, right? Can be automated, right? Earlier, I would call my admin or send an email to an admin who would then call a tourist or cab company who will then...
I remember those days, right? You remember that process.
Right? And then there will be a cab which comes to my office, and then it will drop me to the airport, right? Today, you punch a few buttons and somebody shows up.
Yeah.
Does that mean all these people who were in the chain got eliminated? Probably in that function, but then new value got created. Right? That's how I look at AI creating more value.
The SaaS guys just replaced enterprise sales. They just did it digitally, right? The function went digital.
Yep.
You still have to meet people.
And it's scaled.
Yes, and it's scaled big time.
Right? You can look at our stories, right? Zoho, right? Freshworks, right?
Yes.
They're across the globe. Do they have salespeople in every country they sell in? Clearly not.
Probably one or two, not unlike the old days where there'd be an army, right?
Right. So that's that. So as we were building the thesis for the sort of fund 2 and beyond, SaaS Deeptech was very clear that in a model where you're able to scale without having to do the physical scale of people and infrastructure, etc., and a good, healthy dose of tech differentiator. See, what we're looking for is that can this tech be built by somebody else relatively quickly? Or what do the founders bring, either in the form of knowledge, experience, tech, which creates a good moat, right? I mean, you can always build a high wall and somebody will figure out a tall enough ladder. And then you bring a higher wall and then somebody will build a taller ladder. But then it's just a matter of time. Can you execute, build the wall, monetize, and move on? So that's what we...
And that's the color of money also, according to you, right? You got to figure out, like you said, how are you getting paid by your customers?
Correct.
And that's essential.
Yeah.
That's also the moat.
That's also the
yes.
moat, right? So the color of money, right? Let's talk about it a little bit. Somebody pays you, $10,000. Now, they pay you $10,000 for what, right? You could get paid for offering them a set of people, a set of a project, and complete the project. But if, and that could be across, let's say, 2 customers. But if 20 customers are paying you $500 a month, right? To be that color of money indicates that you have a potential to scale without humans.
Yes.
Right? That's the difference. So here in consulting or in services, your multiplier typically is around people, their time. Now you could dial the knob of dollar per hour, etc., and go up and down where you are in the value chain. Whereas in the product scale business, your ability to scale non-linearly is not linked to the number of people you hire. That's what we're looking at.
Okay, but the thesis is beyond this also, right? You have all 4 partners doing different things. For example, you're heavily focused on deep tech, enterprise, enterprise IT. I want to talk about how enterprise IT, where is that going also?
Sure. Yeah.
Quickly tell us what the other founders do.
Yeah.
How do they take this journey of entrepreneurship? What is their thesis? What is they look at consumer a lot more?
We have, as a fund, all 3 GPs and then, Agam as a principal, we've agreed to not focus on direct to consumer, right? Or
conscious choice.
It's just conscious choice because of the couple of reasons. One is size of the fund. Second is just our experience and our knowledge and our ability to understand those models is extremely limited, maybe non-existent. And hence we said, okay, at least for now,
it's a different ball game, right? I mean,
it's a different ball game. It's a fantastic journey.
Yes.
India's growing brands and, there are lots and lots of good funds. Kamal is one great example.
Yeah, Fireside is a great example.
It's a great example, great friend, but we've just not spent
but there's so much to do in the B2B and innovation side as well, right? And that's huge. India is yet to break through there, right? You were right when you told me earlier that deep tech is yet to take off in India. It's happening, but small. It's like small shoots, right? It's just a germ of ideas just sprouting now.
Whether we've really taken off or not is what kind of billion-dollar exits are there for deep tech companies.
Correct.
So far.
Correct.
Right? You see a few, but I think there's a lot more to come.
Absolutely. I can remember one name, right? ABB acquired Nemosity. That was a good example. I'm sure a lot of that is great. I think that's the journey that you want to paint also with this.
Yeah, and there are quite a few in the pipeline across funds, right, who will sort of get this. So, in deep tech, now, as I said, one is you use deep tech to build a moat to go this thing. Now, there is execution, acquire customers, revenue, run your business, efficiency, governance, right? And, it's critical, especially in the current environment and when you're talking to overseas investors, right? How well are you running your companies? The excuse that I'm a startup and hence I'm going to not worry about the laws as much as I should is not going to fly.
Okay, and your portfolio is looking within India at this point of time as a business, or are they expanding globally?
No, they sell across the globe.
Including the 2 EV investments?
Initially, the EV investments will be here, but
you're happy to take them global.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and you want to do space tech also. Why suddenly space tech? Everybody's talking about. They talked agri-tech, space tech's also been around. Yeah. Why do you want to look at that subject at this point of time?
Yeah. So when we look at deep tech, right, space is an area. So obviously there's commercial value there.
Right.
Right? The government is investing. The private sector is investing. Right? Everybody wants to be connected. Everybody wants to be connected at different levels of quality of service. Right? You and I may be happy with a decent cell phone signal and maybe a fair enough Wi-Fi in the
data connectivity. Yes,
and we're good. Right? Somebody else may have a very strong requirement for privacy, encryption, remote areas, and hence they might need some private 5G networks. Somebody else who's doing maritime, type of applications will need their own sort of private eye in this sky, or a set of eyes in the sky to be able to navigate, their cargo across the globe. More and more communication requirements are going to come up, right? It's going to become satellites, quote unquote, eyes in the skies are going to become commodities, right, over the next sort of 10, 15 years. Now, you could argue who's going to do the launches, who's going to build these things. So commercially, the space is growing.
I agree with you, because even in the US, you look at NASA, it's outsourced a lot to private agencies. Like SpaceX is classic. Everyone thinks Musk is launching it, but he knew that NASA is going to outsource all these projects to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to happen in India as well, you believe?
The need for those kind of devices in the sky is going to happen. Now, if we as the country don't get our act together to launch these things, you'll end up shipping these things to Florida or wherever SpaceX is, and they'll put it in the sky for a pretty good cost, right? I mean, they might even be cost effective, at least initially. Until, as a nation, you figure out, we should...
What's your direction? And
have this capability. And this is not necessarily the PSLV stage rockets, size payloads. You could be doing
smaller payloads, yes.
Right? 1U, 2U, simple satellites. For a couple of lakhs, you could have your satellite up and, dedicated to you.
So have you met people in this?
So
where do you meet them? Universities?
In the last 6 to 9 months, right? I think one of the first areas we had an opportunity was to meet these companies was at the air show.
Which happened in Bangalore recently.
Right?
I mean, it'll happen in January again.
Right? So we had a chance to spend time at the Aero Show. We got invited, to meet the Raksha Mantri and, spend time with the IDEX team and stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is more than toys, right? This is, people are doing stuff in this space. And I have personally met at least 5 companies who are building rockets or trying to build rockets, right, which will launch stuff. We've met companies who are doing all kinds of beamforming technologies. We've met companies who are doing long distance photography using some very, very specialized cameras, right, for obvious...
These are indigenized?
Indigenized. And these are all companies which local folks are doing.
And you've seen their products?
We've seen their product. We've seen them take pictures 7 kilometers away from a rooftop.
So their problem is the money, or is it? I'm sure the defense contracts would be very lucrative, but what is again going back to fundamentals? Is it the execution that comes down to all?
It's a combination of things. One is some of them are early stage in their ideas. Right? They have to,
but they're proper ideas. They're not like college.
No, they're proper. I mean,
research based.
2, 3 of them are from college.
But very advanced.
Very advanced. Right? They've got stuff.
It's good to hear.
Running. They've got stuff running. This is not on paper. Okay. Everybody we've met are beyond paper. Right? The rocket companies have videos of cryogenic stuff in their hangar, and they're doing stuff. Now we have to figure out their scale, right? As to if somebody is building a propulsion system, they also need avionics, right? To guide. Do they have the balanced team to do avionics and propulsion systems, right? So those are the kind of questions which, when we look at companies, and then of course we have to wear the VC hat and look at them not just as tech companies, but
it's an interesting time, Narendra, for us, because one level we've seen the private industry become so lucrative, and you're right, the VC industry is only 1.5% of all investments in the world. And to add to this, the governments realize the importance of this 1.5%, which is innovation. They're doing the health stack, they're doing the logistics stack, they're opening up the space defense sector.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting things happening from their side. You mentioned about language technologies that they're working on,
Yeah.
Bhashini, pardon me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Oh. So is that going to aid more investments into that sector?
Fantastic tailwinds, right? Aadhaar was probably the
change everybody here,
seed of everything, right? I mean, over the last 2-3 weekends, I've been driving around city, running around. The only reason I carry a wallet is because the keys to our office is in my wallet. Other than that, we don't need it.
It's interesting you mentioned Aadhaar and UPI and everything, right? I mean, today, you go to rural parts of Karnataka and you have UPI, and if not the QR code, the number, right? You transfer money. So I think people of the older generation, people who are much 20 years older than us, they ask us, why don't you carry money? So there's no need to, right? Our habits have changed. So India's massive tailwinds for India.
It was funny. I was 3 days ago somewhere, and I pulled out my wallet to actually pay cash and realized there's nothing in my wallet. Like I had zero cash in my wallet, and they all looked at me funny, like,
"Do you have no money?"
You have no money.
And these are people much older, of course.
Yeah, they were like, "Did you forget bringing money, or?"
Yeah, what's going on there?
I said, "I don't need it."
Recently my wife and I went out for a trip, and this just digressing how things have changed in India. You can sit at a hotel and order food. You don't have to go to the hotel's restaurant. It's just on the phone.
Yeah.
You can pay through UPI.
Yeah.
Everything is just on your phone. I mean, it is so interesting. And my wife was concerned that this rural place would not have any of this.
Oh, they're all there. So, to your point earlier about these core, as Nandan and team call it, population scale projects.
Absolutely. They're large language models, right? LLMs.
LLMs will come, but basic infrastructure, whether it's Aadhaar,
which is set up,
right? Whether it's the whole UPI stack, aided by the national payments, guys. And then you keep moving up. They're doing the retail thing. They're doing, health stack is sort of regular. These are all fundamental infrastructure. This is the highway system of the US in 60s.
Yeah.
And
which is the digital highway in India.
It's the digital highway in India. Simpler, faster, more efficient.
And transparency at the core of everything.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Governance, I think, coming from the DNA of the folks who build it, is at the core of these things. Now, these are and continue to create, billion-dollar industries.
So does that make you happy as a guy who went to the US, studied in Bangalore, went to the US, came back? Does it make you believe that India has really changed? It's changed completely.
I'm a kid in a candy store right now.
No? You were just telling me that you told your daughter that you want to feel like a teenager. In fact, if you embrace technology in India, you're connected with the society all through and through.
I'm a kid in a candy store meeting all these founders right now. Of course, you have to balance your heart and your brain in terms of love for the technology, and then balancing it out with the money.
Absolutely, you read my mind. I think the kids at the candy store, you have to make sure that the kids know what they're eating, right? So isn't that a very special role for you?
It's a great time right now to be in technology in India, right? No matter what value chain you are in. AI is definitely going to change. There's enough risk capital available if you come up with proposals which have a path to revenue, path to profitability, path to customer scale, right?
And I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people said 2023 is dead. The startup VC funding is dead, but it's not. You said for you, it's really beautiful.
It's not. It's awesome because founders now come to discussions, and I'm sure most VCs would subscribe to that they come to discussions with very clear plans of, this is how I'm making revenue. This is how my breakup of revenue is. This is how my path to profitability is. And then they, of course, also talk about valuations.
Which is great.
Instead of, starting with, I'm going to be 30x in 6 months and stuff, which is not wrong, because that's what the VCs want to hear. But then it's got the fundamentals behind it of, path to customers, path to profitability, revenue, and then eventually profitability. So I think in some ways, in some subtle ways, it's brought that sense of reality of what is important to run a business,
Interesting times. Narendra, we talked so much about the fund in terms of theses and investment. I really want to talk about, you have Fund 1, Fund 2.
Yeah.
You joined in at the fag end of Fund 1 as you were advising seafund. Now you're part of it. What's the size? What have you done so far? And what are you looking for in the second fund?
Sure. So in Fund 2, it's a category 2.
Yes, AIF registered, SEBI registered fund.
Fund. And we've filed for 200 crores. And there's something called a green shoe option, which can add another 50 to it, right? So $24 million equivalent, and then you can go up to $30 million. We've done 5 investments so far. In Fund 1, we did a few fintech, we did a few SaaS. I think that thesis will continue, and we'll look for more deeper and deeper value now. There's a good flow of deals on SaaS and fintech, but now we're getting quote-unquote choosy further in terms of, are they really going after the infrastructure of fintech? Are they fundamentally creating some other value chain which, is beyond the traditional insurance, beyond the traditional, consumer finance and stuff? What has emerged in Fund 2 also is that we've done 3 + 1, 4 investments in the EV logistics and infra space.
Which is Red Wing, right?
Red Wing is one of the companies, which is actually, they use drones, but I look at them more as a logistics company.
They are a logistics provider, I agree.
Right.
It's called what, it's not even last mile, it's mid-mile.
Mid-mile,
yes.
Right? Yeah, they don't deliver to your home,
yes.
They won't deliver pizza to your home, at least not yet, but, but they're going from, let's say, a large warehouse to a small warehouse.
Like auto parts, maybe, medicine.
Medicine, parts, blood samples, bringing them back to labs and other valuable goods.
And this is what, payload 30 kgs, 40 kgs?
A little less than that now. But range is good, like 100-ish kilometers.
Which is great.
Right. They can do that, and large.
And they figure out flight paths and all that, right?
Flight paths, everything. Very, very advanced team who's done this in the past. They spend time on designing, testing, verifying the drones. They don't sell it for a business, and they make sure it is customized to what they need. And then, of course, run a business.
That's a good B2B kind of a sell, because especially in industrial clusters, this is brilliant.
Industrial, remote clusters of remote parts of India, terrain. And I've joked with Anshul and Manoj and Mahesh many times that the unit economics of these companies, the way I compare them is that if that 50 kilometers had to be done by a guy on a bike, what would it cost? And if the 50, 70 kilometers was done by a drone, what would it cost? How far are we? And the value. Because in India, you have to be sensitive to the cost per kilometer, per kilo, or per mile cost, because everybody's going to look at your unit economics, right? I mean, logistics cost cannot go beyond a certain percentage in any transaction, and everybody is going to be sensitive to that. And I think these guys have started off, pretty
very well. So those are kind of investments that you want to look at.
Yeah, and then we did a couple in the EV space, which are infrastructure, right? So
charging.
In charging, our fund thesis is that fast charge long term is the way to go. We're not a very big fan of traditional swapping as we see it.
Everybody's saying that swap won't work. Ather's been saying it. I have to get into the unit economics and the user behavior of that. But why? Why would you say that?
It may work in
commercial.
An old analogy, right? Many of us, when we used to travel, we used to carry an extra battery for our phone.
Yes.
Right? And you ripped out the back cover, pulled out the battery, put the new battery in, and do some other
Or we had those connectors, these battery packs that we used to get 3, 4. I remember just 5, 8 years ago when I traveled to the US, I'd have these 4 packs, and that flight incident happened, one of
Over time, again, like we talked about earlier, right? Technology creates more value, right? Some companies figured out that we can charge your battery faster,
fast charger.
Right?
Yeah.
And then faster, and then even more faster, right? Or at least we'll give you enough lifeline to survive the next 2 hours. And then
that's just kill that industry. Yes.
Right? So it's essentially battery and charging, now bigger batteries. Fund's belief is that fast charging is the way to go.
Fast charging and range.
Right? To aid that range. Now, swapping, or at least swap design, where we invested in, they're solving a very specific problem by battery swap in commercial vehicles at a scale.
Now makes sense. Okay.
Right. We didn't really want to go and swapping on your two-wheeler, three-wheeler, you pull out, you go to the gas station, pull out something, put something in. And that might work for some markets and for some customers. But is that going to be at scale? Given the capital cost, real estate costs in India, and the security around their infrastructure, we believe that fast charging will leapfrog all that team. The other thesis we had in this EV space, which is sort of contributing to this whole clean tech phenomenon, is OEMs initially may be full stack developers. Sorry, I'm using a software analogy.
Go on. It works, right? It's the same thing. Whereas in many ways.
You'll build everything on your own.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, we met one of the OEMs, wonderful team, but slightly out of range for us to invest. They're doing everything in-house, right? And for the
Which is how they have to think of, right?
Initially for the right reasons. Once you scale, right? I mean, once the large automotives scale, once the large EVs scale, OEMs scale, they're going to have to work with specialized providers. Vehicle control unit is one kind of a component, which is a brains, right? See, an EV is really a software platform.
It is
with batteries and GPS and wheels.
I'm going to bring in another software analogy. Sure. Cloud is now commoditized.
Yes.
It's the data, it's the AI that you're building on that, right? Similar with the space.
Absolutely. I mean, when you shift gears in a traditional ICE engine, you do something with hand physically, or the automatic is actually doing something physically. The knob, right? Now, even that was done by software
intelligently,
intelligence, right? Now that software has gone to a different level in the EV space. Everything in that.
It's the battery and the power and the motor.
Battery, power, acceleration, GPS, health of the cells of your battery, controlling the charging input, discharge unit, everything.
I mean, you're glad you read my mind. The automobile today, it's about chips today. I think there are a million lines of code, more than that.
Yeah.
And there are chips everywhere.
Yeah.
And there could be a centralized chip which the automobile ecosystem working towards. So you see, you're right. So battery ecosystem will be standardized in many ways, do you think?
Yeah. So to your first point,
yes.
Now, even in a traditional ICE engines or ICE engine-based cars, there's a lot of chips, there's a lot of software.
Yes.
Right? In an EV vehicle in the future, you'll have less number of components.
Yes.
Of course, far less emission, far more software, right? Because now everything, including your fuel, which is a battery, is being controlled by software, range, predictability, everything. To the question you had was, is there some centralized chip controlling it? Typically referred to as a vehicle control unit.
Yes.
Right? Or the CPU in the PC world is called as VCUs in the EV world. So our thesis was, these providers will grow, right? And which is why one of our early investments, smaller investment, but one of our early investments in this space is to look at this industry. And and by the way, they don't just supply to a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler. They could even supply to an infrastructure player in a warehouse. So
it's interesting. So these companies can not just launch their own brands, but they can become, companies that can give platforms to others.
Yeah, and there are. The other thing, if you notice in...
Are these energy management companies now? Would you say energy management? What would you call them?
They're energy management companies. It's just that when we say energy management, people might think as building energy management or plant.
Or generation.
Yeah, they're more focused at this moving platform.
What's a new term? We should coin a new term.
Vehicle control unit is what they call it. So that vehicle could be a two-wheeler, could be a three-wheeler, could be a four-wheeler, or could be a powertrain.
Motors. Yes.
A series of motors in a large warehouse.
Yes.
And this is how this control unit is sort of controlled.
This is very interesting time for the EV industry.
Batteries is going to be very critical in the future. Batteries is a circular economy, right? So
recycling will be big.
It's big. It's going to be big. Now, which technology, takes forward. I'm not the best expert.
Will we have something called pre-owned batteries? So, you run your battery. So maybe I bought a car and now I don't want to buy a new car, but I just take a pre-owned battery and put it into the car. So
today, batteries, guess what percentage of the car cost they are?
Batteries would be 50%, right? Usually.
So now, for somebody who's doing a logistics business, the guy it's the fruit seller analogy, right? The fruit seller starts with a certain amount of capital in the morning, goes through the business, ends the day with that capital and hopefully some profit, reinvests that in the next day. right? And then you sort of grow bigger. Now, a logistics person might go pick up sort of a rental from somebody, lease a battery for the day, maybe, run around X amount of
Yeah, I've seen those models, yes.
Right? That's those kind of models. So now these batteries are more and more likely to be pre-owned in the future to reduce your capital cost.
And it'll not be swap, it'll still be chassis
Combination.
kind of a thing, or it'll be a combination. Wow.
Combination, right? Swap doesn't necessarily mean there's this fancy handle, ergonomic handle, and you pull out and you put it back. Swap could mean a very traditional pull out some stuff, industrial design stuff, and then sort of put it in and then run it, right? So pre-owned battery, circular economy, the whole economy around managing that.
I think jury is out there today in fast charge. I got your point. It's so interesting. So that's the space that you're after.
That's the space we're running after, and we'll look for more and more in that space as
anything in fintech, enterprise IT. It's
IT,
huge.
Enterprise IT is always interesting. In enterprise IT, there are a few things which we look for, right? One is the ability for it's essentially the problem you're solving and the teams.
So, for example, generative AI, all the big companies that I talk to are using Gen AI in a way, but they haven't figured out how does it matter in their processes and systems. Yeah. Where's the tech there? I mean, when you're already borrowing somebody else's foundation, you have to get into the deep science of it in terms of data, right?
Initially, again, as I said earlier, even in the enterprise tech, the companies which are able to figure out Gen AI's use in their customers' workflow and domain will get quick wins.
Yeah, just like a retail example.
Yeah. I mean, you're able to figure out your customer better. You're able to get your legal flow better in an enterprise. You're able to predict logistics better in your enterprise. If you're able to use these models, you're able to build digital twins of your infrastructure, plants, machinery, etc., and do predictability better, right? All these are aiding using Gen AI and AI tools to get to your logic faster, right? Now, I'm sure there'll be companies who want to build the Gen AI stuff for a brand new use case in India, right? So, it's, I mean, now all this is being powered by algorithms and semiconductors, right? Chips. So that's an area, a bit of a segue, but we're looking at
which is great, which means you're a long-term investor. You clearly have 8-year horizons with your LPs.
And a little bit of the chip head, which I come in from.
Absolutely. Right? 22 years spending at a chip company, obviously you'd be like that.
There's a bit of a bias there also, right? And slightly understanding of that space. So we're looking at that. It's not easy, but we're looking at that and seeing what makes sense.
What is the color of your LPs? Are these technocrats? Are these fundamental business people who say, hey, I don't know how it works, but I want to be there for the long run, purely say, let's put it out there. Let's see how India grows kind of scenario. What do you think? What is the color of your LPs?
More the latter. So one of our larger LPs who was in Fund 1 and Fund 2 is a state government.
Oh, got it.
Interestingly,
got it.
And they've said, like, go for it.
Yeah.
Right? Go for these long-term investments, etc. Of course, they need the return. And Fund 1, they've been very happy. We've given, 45% plus, close to 48% net IRR over the last 4 years. Hope to sustain at least a decent run rate over the next few years. But, the things are looking
I'm glad you said that. State governments always had startup funds, right? They've never taken, not many have taken the LP route yet, but they are, thanks to the fund of funds and everything. Is it working out for them?
It's worked out for them. The only evidence of that is they came back in Fund 2.
Yeah, that's true. That's that count. But the others, have they come to you in terms of saying, let's invest?
At least one other state government came in a big way, and they're figuring out the process of how to sort of get there. I'm sure there are other state governments looking at these models.
It's interesting to see India look at that way. That means that these are transformative governments. They're very serious about it, right? It does work if they, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that we've given them the Fund 1 numbers, and Fund 2, of course, they've come back big
because who better than the government? They have all the infrastructure. The startups can ride on it with your help, right?
Capital will come in different forms.
Yes.
And capital will be given out in different forms, even from the government.
Correct.
It could be direct investing. It could be fund of funds. It could be providing business. And it could be policy which aids startups.
Absolutely.
Right?
They listen to innovation.
You don't want to make it an unfair advantage for them, but at least give them an opportunity to participate in the business, right? So all these could be forms, right? And at least from a seafund perspective, we're looking at more and more where you've got these tailwinds.
Would you say that next 10 years, I keep saying this, I think about India is now in the cusp of what the US was just after the war and how they grew all the way up till the 80s, right? Do you see India growing?
For sure. I don't think there is any debate across the world. I mean, the toughest critic of the Indian economy would say, man, you guys are doing pretty okay.
Yeah.
Right? It's a combination of everything which is happening.
Yeah, the political scientists and critics say we're doing pretty okay.
Yeah.
The business guys are always saying, yes, we need to look at India more seriously.
The numbers are there. The stability seems to be there, and hopefully,
will continue.
The stability, will continue in terms of policy and decision making. There are tailwinds like geopolitics, which are in some ways aiding us.
Yes.
Right. And the faster we capitalize on it, right, over the next 2 to 5 years, the faster our path is to a $10 trillion economy. Right now, there are all kinds of estimates of when do we get there. From a fund perspective, right, for us, it's a great time because some of these core logistics, tech, deep tech, will all be transformative. So our Fund 2 thesis, I mean, when you asked me earlier, right, we're looking at typical SaaS businesses, fundamental businesses. We're looking at the newer sectors. We talked about, space.
EVs.
No, space, EVs, of course, we've done investments, right? The evidence is there. Space, semiconductor, clean tech are areas we're spending more and more time, right? Understand. How many we do, time will tell. But these are areas we're looking. Founders are now reaching out to us.
Good.
Right? And which is, I mean, my background.
Yes.
Manoj and Mayresh both have run businesses. Manoj's been CEO of a company. Our fundamental thesis is, can we help the founders? We're all operators.
Yes, you read my mind. Because you understand how to operate, and therefore the color of money is something you know why you're raising the money.
Yeah.
So you guide the founders there.
Yeah. Now we don't want to interfere in their journey, but wherever we can aid them, that's the strength.
And it's pre-Series A mostly.
Pre-Series A.
No, good. And that'd be what, 500K plus kind of investment.
500K, 250K, 300K, up to $1 million over a round or two we could do. We. As a thesis, again, we believe that a good 40% of our Fund 2, we want to set aside for follow-ons.
Got it.
Right? So that, after initial 10, 15, which we make, we'd love to put more money back into some of the ones which are growing.
So you'll probably do about 20, 30 investments a year?
Less than 20.
Less than 20?
20-ish. I mean,
20-ish is good enough.
Could be, that should be good
enough. That's fantastic. My last question to you is, I have said AI, you didn't want to do consumer, but AI is helping. It's helped me a lot. I told you about these healthcare companies that used it to help help me live better, pardon me. And, giving me supplements and improving my, you could say that in a way I lost a lot of weight, and I told you about the skin thing, they brought that down. It's very interesting how now people are building AI data science to improve individual lives. Would that be deep science for you? Would that be interesting at all? I mean, also the fact that people think that doctors are now scared, saying, is that going to replace them in a way? But I think it's going to aid them, right? Instead of living on historical data that you've not made sense of. Here's something that tell you perhaps this could be a gut problem. Perhaps this is a respiratory problem, or a combination of the two, right?
The key word there is aid, right? Now, aid means it's helped you as a consumer, right? Your outcomes are better than the past. And you're willing to pay for it.
Yes. That's a consumer, is he, or the customer?
As a customer. Now, obviously, there was a tech company behind it. There's probably another layer of tech companies behind it, right? Now, when AI gets into that stream more and more, right, where the outcome is great for an end customer and the monetization is there for that, right? Again, the business.
So that's when the B2B also happens. The large hospitals say, hey, I need to get this,
correct,
right?
Yeah. So BestDoc as a company who helps, one of our portfolio companies, which came back in a second too, as they help the patient journey, right, through the hospitals, right, the front door and, all the journey. Now, as we put more and more technology behind that patient's journey and making the outcomes better, helping them choose the doctors, helping them through the path, it makes the life of the patient better. Now, we've invested in BestDoc. BestDoc is going to take these technologies and do better things so that the patient's life is better. That's the use of AI, going into tech, which we potentially, in this case, have invested. More and more companies will invest.
Okay.
So AI in the consumer space, as you mentioned, will happen. AI will get into more and more enterprise workflows. Eventually, these will benefit a customer somewhere. Right?
So it's embrace it. You're saying embrace it, do it now, experiment.
No choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely no choice, right? I think almost 25 years ago, Andy Grove, came and made a quote saying, in 5 years, every businesses will be, at that time, e-businesses, or they will not remain businesses, right? I think today it's fair to say, to borrow Andy's thought process, that over the next 5-7 years, if you're not using, AI tools to improve your efficiency, somebody else will do it faster, better, cheaper.
It's interesting. I want to ask you, because you're a chip guy, before I move on to the last personal questions on, books and things. A lot of consumer companies are investing in chips now. Why is that? Like Amazon's talking about it very openly.
Sure. So it started with the fact that they had specialized needs, right? Most chip companies were general purpose companies.
Yes.
Right? Whether it was an NVIDIA or an Intel or an AMD. Now, an Amazon or some of the other companies, they had a very specialized need, right? Like, I just want to do media streaming, encoding, decoding, etc. Right? Apple went down the path of, it took them a while, but they eventually, they built their own processors, right? It could be a combination of controlling your ecosystem destiny, controlling your cost, and the fact that it's getting easier, not easy, to do a fabless type model, right? I recently, at NASSCOM, did a panel on, 90 minutes. I had 10 founders, 8 to 10 founders, on how the Indian ecosystem is ready for a fabless model.
Absolutely.
Which is, you design chips, you don't have to get it manufactured here. Your customer may not be here. Now, this has been happening inside the larger companies' global capability centers here, but now much of the talent, the senior talent, is stepping out and saying, well,
I'll do it for you. Yeah.
I could do it as a. And more importantly, there are things like RISC-V and these cores are available. You could add value to that and make specialized products, not just services, for customers. So coming back to your point, more and more people are likely to build chips.
This is going to disrupt retail, automotive, anything consumer, because people used to talk operating system, right?
Yeah.
Operating system is commoditized, I think. Yeah. I think it's all about the data and the chip. The chip warfare is real, right?
It is real. It is. Let me put it differently, right? The need for more and more chips is just growing like crazy, right? The warfare now has gone into a mindset across the globe, which is, we want to be able to have control of our supply chain.
Yes.
Post, the last 3 years' learnings. And hence, people are investing. See, even in India, if you see, there's a lot of discussions around fab, right, or a fabrication capacity, right? The first step is now you see OSATs coming in. But a lot of energy I'm trying to put spotlight on is the design capability.
Yeah, that's a good problem for startups to solve.
Yeah, it's an area startups can get in. It's an area we're looking at. Get more and more design capability. We used to talk about this in 2005, right? There's so many of these companies that did exactly this. Maybe they were a tad too early. Now it's the right time. Now it's the right time. The markets are there. I mean, the EVs, the IoTs, the cameras.
Yeah.
It's just chips are getting into
everything
now, right? Small, large, everything.
In fact, a large EV player in India has filed for an IPO recently, and they're doing chips. Can you believe that? It's so interesting.
Yeah. And now it's become, you can take cores, right? You can take RISC-V cores, ARM cores, and customize it to what you want. Ship the design to Taiwan or somewhere.
Manufacture, get it here, put it in your vehicles,
India, get it back.
And control the data of the customer.
So we believe that the whole semiconductor ecosystem is also ripe for investment.
So
Fabless, OSATs, testing capabilities, tools capabilities. That's one area which I'd love to see more companies
startups come in,
build tools.
And if any of these enterprise guys are watching this, right time to, if you have the network, do it right now and get into it and contact Narendra. I'm sure they should do it now.
Sure. I mean, yeah, and like you said, it's a bit of a long play.
It is a long play.
Right? You have to have the patience to invest, talent, of course. And this is not software where you did a release, found some things which are not correct, and did another release over the weekend.
I mean, I remember at 5, 6, there were what, Magma, Cosmic, Sankhya were some of the companies. I mean,
yeah, now it's grown.
And
some of these have been acquired by larger companies. Right? In fact, Sankhya was on,
the panel
was on part of the panel. So yeah, that's an ecosystem which we
can grow,
believe is
and support. And I'm glad you said that. Okay, we've talked everything business. Personally, how do you unwind? I mean, it's your. I mean, after 22 years in a chip company, going to a large Microsoft after that, and then doing this fund is fabulous. How do you unwind?
I've started to play golf. Right. I'm not completely sure yet whether that's unwind for me, but I did it more as a requirement, and I had to do this. But
which is good activity, though.
Work a lot, yeah. But I think more and more of reading. I do a lot of diverse reading.
Yes.
Right, from scriptures to tech to financial, and I'm learning. I have to learn a lot.
What are you reading, though? Anything in particular?
I'm not a big fan of books as such. But I watch a lot of videos.
Which is okay.
I watch a lot of people,
documentaries,
experts,
white papers.
White papers. I read a lot of. I mean, especially when you want to get into depth, I just search, pull out white papers, put it in a folder, and then just sort of. Once or twice I've experimented. It's like, okay, chat, tell me the summary of this paper, and then
it's wrong. You could pick it out, right?
Okay, that's not the right thing. I use it only to sort of pique my interest further. It's like, okay, so I need to dig into this further.
Very nice.
Right, so that it doesn't become inertia to get in. So a lot of diverse reading. Now I think I'm building back patience for long form reading.
Which is good.
Online, and maybe I'm becoming like kids where I'm reading everything on a device rather than
paper. Well, that's the natural progression for all of us. And how many of us read newspapers, for example? They're very rare. Yeah. But someone do it for behavior kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, in my office, you have 5 papers, but people are so young, they don't pick it up. I do look at it in the morning. Habit. But things change. But great. You're playing golf. You're having a good time meeting founders. Awesome. A very, very awesome time for you. And I wish seafund all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.